Welcome to the Spread and Essence Sports Betting Picks podcast thing. I'm Nesson.com's Mike Cole, joined once again and as always by Ricky Doyle. Ricky, how are you?
I'm good. Welcome back, Mike.
It's great to be back. I'm telling you.
You're still in vacation mode.
I'm trying to get on.
Nice. You look nice.
Try to get on Wicket or Kick It or whatever.
Yeah.
On the banner. Hold my banner. It's I'm back.
Yep. How was your time off?
Keegan Stiefel did a tremendous job in my stead last week. I was monitoring from afar. I had a great week off. Thank you for asking. It was one of those things where I was talking to you very briefly about this yesterday. One of the biggest misnomers is that people come back from vacation recharged.
Yeah,
that's not true at all. If anything, it's
false.
the opposite. Not necessarily because it's an exhausting endeavor to go on vacation, but just you get back and you're like, wow, here I am at work.
It's catch up, too. There's a lot of catch up.
It's actual catch up, but it's like there's this mental catch up too. And even today, it kind of hit me where we're recording this on Wednesday as we typically do. I was just like, man. 1 week ago, I could do whatever I wanted. And it's just like having no plans, just walking around town, dip into a store if I want to, go to the beach if you want to.
I often think of that, but in relation to, 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I could have done whatever I wanted.
Oh, my God.
Summer vacation. This is a nice time of year. We don't have that luxury anymore.
No, you don't. And that's I was actually listening to another podcast, no free ads, but one of the Barstool ones, the Chicago guys have their Dog Walk podcast where they do random fantasy drafts of stuff every week.
Yeah.
And they did the worst things of summer, and I was listening to that the other day. And it weirdly got me excited for fall. What a miserable existence I live here, where it's June 25th or 26th, and I'm excited for fall, even though I love summer. We're through the Rubicon, if you will, on to days are getting shorter already.
Yep.
The world's a terrible place.
You look up, it's going to be over real soon.
But we'll make the best of it. That's it puts us in a little bit of a pickle here, where we have to try to navigate our way through the summer and talk about stuff.
Speaking of dogs, the real dog days for us.
Yeah.
Traditionally, we table the podcast until the fall.
We don't speak all summer.
Yeah, exactly. We kind of go our separate ways. Yep. But now we're being forced to locked in a room and having to engage in conversation. And we don't know what's going to come of it. So
this
is a real flying by the seat of our pants.
Yeah. I think. How deep do I want to get into this before we dive into? We're going to get into the NHL today. We're going to get into the NBA draft very briefly.
Yep.
Because
talk a little baseball.
Overshot ourselves there. Yeah, and we'll talk a little debate even. This is now a political show. I don't think people realize, certainly the fair listeners and viewers of this program don't realize how much other stuff we have going on in our lives. Especially
except
at work.
for maybe when we mention it once a week.
Yeah, this is
it's usually always off the top.
The running gag about this show, between just you and I, is that it's more of a therapy session for us to kind of leave breadcrumbs here and there about how miserable some things are. So, or how not miserable. That's a bad word. Difficult, challenging, time-consuming. It's a cry for help. I don't know. So we'll get into that stuff. But so I guess that's it. I use that as an excuse for whatever comes after that.
Yeah. Well, do you want to start with the most important storyline that we're dealing with?
I don't even know what you're referring to.
So did you see Hunter Green puke on the mound?
I saw a headline. I did not actually see it.
Oh, well, look it up.
Okay.
Was it, you don't have to do it now.
Give me some more. What about it?
You pumped some gas about 95 and just yacked all over the mound.
I mean, I've got a pretty good idea of what it would be without having seen it. I'm guessing the man vomits on the pitcher's mouth.
He just pukes on the mound. Yeah. We've seen it before. We've seen it with guys before.
Yeah, of course.
But I just thought that was something I did want to mention is we've delved into that type of subject matter before. I know we our famous Mike Ditka fartcast.
I was gonna say we're usually talking about the other end of the.
Well, so that would be my question. Would be would you rather puke on the mound or fart during a press conference?
Oh, I thought you were gonna say would you rather puke on the mound or like dumping your pants on the mound, in which case it's puke every time. No, puke. Like puke 1,000 times over. Like, because
pretty badass if you can if it comes right after you throw 95.
Yeah, and
too.
it's probably like now
really
I
reach back.
Now I got 96.
Yeah, you let it all. You empty the tank.
There's that let a little bit out. It's one of those things where it's like, man, you must be working hard. Maybe you're playing through something.
Yep.
There's a lot of good stuff you can say about a guy who pukes on the mound or any field of play. That's the other thing in football. It's like it's almost.
You must feel so
romanticized
recharged after that too, because like you're just like there's definitely a feeling of like you're holding it in, and it all comes out, and like I would immediately be like, I'm gonna have the biggest second half, or in his case, like
this is literally 7 pitches, 7 pitches into the game.
Yeah, like so at that point, I'm like,
what happened?
I might go. I might
he sick.
I might go the distance in this one.
Was he sick?
Like I got at least 7 innings after a nice puke.
Like too much pre-workout. Like
yeah, I mean,
shotgun a couple beers before.
He could have been hungover for all we know.
That's
also
too.
I don't know. But yeah, no. So I didn't know if you caught that.
I am now up to speed on that. Yeah,
good.
It was a very steady stream of vomit.
Did you watch the? So you were out during when the Celtics won the championship.
Yeah.
Also for a big chunk of the Stanley Cup.
Yep.
So how close? How far did you disconnect? Were you able to? While you were away?
I don't disconnect.
Yeah.
It's more of a personal thing where I feel like I'm going to miss too much. So I do have I have the phone on still, so I'm kind of monitoring that. I think what does disconnect even mean? Like our job is in sports, so it's not like I'm just going to not go watch sports. I don't watch a ton of sports anyways as it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I tried to watch what I could with those. Those were some late nights. The night that they won the championship, though, I was kind of going back and forth between that and Monday Night Raw because I wanted to see the Wyatt Six.
Okay, there you go.
So yeah, I was kind of I had the wrestling on the tablet and also watching with the basketball with one eye. Yeah, I saw most of it. There wasn't a whole. We nailed it. We nailed it.
The NBA Finals.
Yeah, like that went about as pretty much exactly as we kind of expected or suspected. So yeah, it was whatever. I didn't watch much of the parade because it's like, man, whatever.
Not a big parade guy.
No, I have no problem with the parades. I actually think there was that video that went viral of like Joe Mazzulla getting off the duck boat and just like high fiving people and just kind of going nuts,
meniscus or whatever.
mental. Yeah, like that was cool. I do like there is something cool. I think they made this point on Twitter. It was like I think one of the biggest things you can ask of like the people that you watch or root for is for them to care as much as you do. And also like as a bonus being able to like reciprocate the appreciation for them. That's like all you can ask for, I think, as a sports fan.
I don't even think
that was a good example of that.
It's not so much the parade, it's like the other little things that come up in the course of the parade.
Sure.
Like them going and playing like cornhole at Cisco Brewers or something in the Seaport. Like that makes them a little bit more relatable.
And not to get too pie in the sky, but like I don't know, especially up here where it's miserable people and like the weather's usually terrible. And like, so for 2 million people or 1.5 million people to get out there
and all of a sudden be in a good mood
under sunny skies, like that's an achievement in itself. So yeah, I'm certainly not anti-parade. I would never go to one. I don't think ever again, except maybe if my son wanted to go. Because it's just, that's too many people. My father went. Like, my dad just randomly texted me. I was like, I'm at the beach, Dad.
Yeah.
Good for you. He's like, it's humid. I was like, yeah, man, it's the middle of June, and you're around 650,000 kids. Like, this is... so, it's not something I would do, but I have no problem with it. I think there are people like anti-parade. It's like, no. Yeah. Like, we take that for granted. This is just a silly conversation to have on its own, where it's like, no, if you have a parade to celebrate your team winning, those don't come around very often.
I agree. Now we're on to the offseason.
There will be a parade in Florida for the Florida Panthers. They won the Stanley Cup. That was a tremendous Game 7 was one of the best hockey games I've ever seen. Good, yeah. We'll kind of start there using the Panthers as kind of a springboard to talk a little Bruins. I do what I really like about the NFL or the NHL, excuse me, and the NBA to a slightly lesser extent is, that Game 7 was Monday. The draft is Friday. Free agency is the week after, and we're into it.
The draft in particular is just really snuck up on us. The NBA draft, especially.
We'll get into that.
But no, because now we got the 2 days. So that's throwing me all out of whack.
Yeah.
And then like immediately following that, you have a 2-day NHL draft, and it's just like to your point, like we're still catching our breath here.
And then the
in
NHL,
this region, and then we got to deal with that.
Yeah, and then like the cap thing too, like. Free agency comes through, and it's, everybody knows how much money they have to spend, so this thing goes fast. These people, like, this is that whole, like, the Canada media thing. Like, these guys are all up in the cottages in, like, Northern Ontario by the end of, next week.
It's kind of amazing, too, like, how it really depends on the year for, like, how invested we get, like, at our place of work in a particular draft, because, like, it was a good. Think of how sick we were of the NFL draft by the time it came around, because it was just like 3 months of us dissecting the NFL draft from every single angle. And yet these two drafts come out of nowhere, and it's like, well, you look at the Celtics, who have, with a pick number 30 or whatever, and then you have the Bruins, who didn't even have a first round pick.
They didn't have
until the other day.
Have the first 3 picks.
Exactly. So like that, understandably so, wasn't really on our radar, but now all of a sudden it is. So
yeah,
might as well talk about it.
Yeah, so we'll start in the NHL. We'll start with the Bruins. So the Panthers win the Cup. I think a team that is easy to root for if you're a Florida Panthers fan. I do wonder how sustainable their success is with the way that they play. They also have some pretty big free agency decisions coming up. Yep. Looking at the odds at FanDuel right now, they are the favorites to repeat. They're 9-1, followed by Carolina at plus 950. Colorado, who also has some major cap concerns, plus 950. Dallas 10-1, Edmonton 10-1, Vegas 11-1. You have to go a little bit of ways down to 23-1 for the Bruins. One thing we kind of kicked around,
is a stark contrast from the NBA, where the Celtics are 3-1 to repeat next season. So that is just the nature of the two sports, silly, obviously, but also like I do think it speaks a little bit to how sort of wide open the NHL is going into next season.
Well, and so this is kind of where we were going to start, is looking at the Panthers through a local lens and kind of say, what could the Bruins learn from the Panthers? What can be replicated? I don't know. How do they kind of tie? And like, if you do think about it, this is a team, the Bruins have played the Panthers in the playoffs the last 2 seasons. Last year, they went 7 games. This year, where Florida was certainly better and the Bruins weren't as good as they were last year, that series went 6. It was pretty competitive. So, like, by that alone, if you want to just use the Stanley Cup champion as a benchmark, you're not that far off.
Sure.
This is a huge offseason for the Bruins. They have, $24 million in cap space. We just saw the Ullmark trade, Linus Ullmark going to Ottawa. I am super, super interested in see more so what they're going to do starting Monday with free agency and the start of the new year, as opposed to the draft. The draft is whatever. They might not even have this pick by the time this gets out there. But I guess we can start with the Florida thing. I think that's certainly the better blueprint if you're looking at the two teams that made it to the Cup final. I do think there are some things that are replicable,
Sure.
But I was reading Florida Hockey Now. George Richards said he ran through like every move that they made to get here, and he said he literally wrote every move seemed to work. It's
incredible.
Yeah,
and like they in a lot of spots too, like they swung for the fences. Like they weren't.
Yes.
These weren't necessarily moves where they were working in the margins. Like, it takes a lot to go out and be like, we're just gonna go ahead and trade Jonathan Huberdeau after like the season he had.
Mackenzie Weegar is was a guy they valued at the time.
It's just like every single move works. So I guess in that sense, what message does that send? Like, be bold.
Yeah. So not even that too.
Like, go nuts.
And I was looking. I didn't remember this or didn't know it at the time. Whatever. Like Tkachuk obviously wanted out of Calgary, and he basically was like, I'm only going to 3 teams, and it was Florida, Carolina, and St. Louis. So like I guess that tilts the scales in your favor, but I don't know, like that also means excuse me, it's not as you've really got to step up the ante to beat out one of these other 2 teams. Like it could have just as easily been St. Louis or Carolina. So like, and I think that's the one thing is you have to be bold, or no, you don't necessarily have to be bold. It's just one way to go. I don't think the direction that the Bruins are going is wrong. I wouldn't say it's super bold, but maybe they, I guess if you're looking for a detour, that would be it.
I think the biggest thing for the Bruins is like they're kind of trying to find a new identity, right? Like, and
but
I
they're
feel
still
like
kind of in the midst of the old one at the same time.
Well, that's what I mean.
But that's understandable.
But I think that in order for them to take the next step, there's got to be some sort of shift in that regard. Because I feel like Florida definitely has an identity. Like, I feel like Florida, they remind me a little bit of the Bruins from like a few years ago, where they can because they can beat you in so many different ways.
Well, I also think Maurice and Cassidy are similar, where it's like if you don't win in that window, you look out below because it's a demanding style. And they bought into it. They talked about that too afterwards. Like, this is not easy to play, but these guys all bought into it.
And I think that you saw that really on display in the Bruins series against them, where it was like it felt like they were constantly playing catch up. Mm-hmm. Like, either from like an offensive firepower standpoint. Like, that's the other thing. Like, when I watch Florida, I'm like, they've got just the sheer number of guys who can put the puck in the net on the big stage. Like, they got some guys who come playoff time, you're like, all right, they're gonna score. Whereas with the Bruins, pretty top heavy in that regard, and then you have some of the disappearing acts that you've had these past couple of years. So in terms of like what lessons can the Bruins take from the Panthers, like I mean, you need to bolster that offense. Like, they've got to get more offensive depth.
So here's one thing I wonder is like, is it a roster building thing where are you built to win 50 to 55 games and get in the playoffs and see what you can do from there? Or are you built to win games in the playoffs and maybe that doesn't manifest itself as much in like January?
Well, that's kind of what makes the Linus Ullmark trade that much more fascinating, right? Like, with those two goaltenders, it's the former.
Sure.
Where it's like, yeah, we're putting a premium on the regular season. Like, we need these two guys to get there.
Yep.
Now, and it's sort of a matter of circumstance. Like, they had to trade him.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think there was any question that there was going to be a deal made this offseason. But now it's like, so what do we do now? Like, how do we craft our identity now?
And I'm not even sure because, like, ideally, I don't think they were building I don't think Don Sweeney and Cam Neely get up out of bed and are like, how do we build the next great 50-win team? Like, they're trying to build a Stanley Cup champion, right? So it's like, it's not. I don't know. Like, that's a difficult, thing to kind of figure out, because if you take that chance, there's no guarantee it works out, and all of a sudden it could backfire you, and that's where again the boldness comes into play. But I think a lot of it too, and this speaks to a lot of those moves that they made, is like you have to hit those out of the park then too. Like, the margin for error becomes a little slimmer when you start building your club a certain way.
Yep. I mean, and also too, like you did have the benefit in these various iterations of the Bruins over the past 2 decades, really. Like, there was a lot of continuity on those teams, and you were kind of filling in some cracks around them. Whereas now it's like you're nearing a point where you're going, like I said, the identity is completely going to be overhauled here at some point. Like, I mean, you got Pastrnak and Marchand and McAvoy, so like you do have a strong foundation in place. But I think the moves that you're going to be seeing in the upcoming off seasons are a little bigger than maybe you're used to in the past.
That would be interesting.
Yeah,
it's hard to totally, because like I don't think you look at this is the thing. I don't think you look at your roster and be like, we need to get bold for bold's sake, and who wants David Pastrnak?
But I think you gotta bring in, like, so what would constitute a successful offseason for the Bruins? Like, I think you gotta bring in like a top 6 center. Like, I think, like, somebody, a top 6 forward.
There's a ton of Elias Lindholm buzz.
A move like that, right? I don't like.
He's
a good guy. I don't know. Like,
yeah. I look at. So I was kind of digging through stuff. I like the idea of a guy like Chandler Stevenson, who was out in Vegas, and he's put together a couple pretty good seasons the last couple of years. I think he's projected to make $5 or $6 million, maybe a little cheaper than Lindholm. And like, now you're looking at Coyle, Zaka, Stevenson. Is it like, are 3 second-line centers better than 1 first-line center, and then whatever behind that? I also, then maybe you save some money and go get a guy like Tyler Toffoli. But like, the question is too is, excuse me, what's the future for Jake DeBrusk? So there's moving parts even within there. So I think a perfect offseason would be finding a way to re-sign DeBrusk and also bringing in 2 more top 6 guys.
Yeah.
Easier said than done.
I was gonna say. I mean, they do have the benefit of a decent amount of cap space. Like, what is it, like $21 million? I think they have to play with. But still, like that goes quick, especially when you have to pay the goaltender.
Yeah, and I'm thinking,
and that's priority number one at this point.
It's probably like $8 million a year for Swayman. Feels like what everybody kind of is selling on. That's the 6th highest paid goalie. But there goes a big
the other
chunk
sort
of
of layer of the Ullmark trade, where if you were gonna poke holes in it, being the lack of cap relief that they got from that. Like I think, like clearly you accepted the reality that we're not gonna get maybe as much cap relief as we want here, but we're getting the first round pick.
You're buying a first round pick, basically.
Yeah, which also, but like they had zero leverage really in that whole thing.
Yeah,
like you had to trade him. Everybody knew you had to trade him. You had the 15 team no trade list, so like the options were limited, and it was clear that he was willing to exercise those rights, and so like at some point you just had to kind of choose the best deal available. And then I don't think they did terrible in that regard.
I agree, and I think it's like the inclination, which is understandable, to just be like horrible return.
Yeah.
With like 3 minutes after the deal is announced, is always kind of like, well, maybe there's something else coming here.
Yeah.
I know Korpisalo's not endeared in these parts yet, but I think there was a lot of that similar conversation about when they signed Ullmark.
Sure.
So there is that. What was else I was gonna say? Oh, and then kind of that point about like they didn't have a ton of leverage. Like the Markstrom trade to Jersey was another one where it's like that happened a week ago. Now all of a sudden you're running out of chairs.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like no different than like a quarterback carousel over the offseason where it's like it's like those two were just kind of staring at each other.
Which like
for
maybe if
the better part of a week.
Yeah, maybe if that's the second guess you want to look at is like, could you have done this earlier and got out in front of that? I'm not sure. I don't know. So.
Just for a little bit of context, like how where the Bruins are at, like as it relates to Stanley Cup contenders. So on the betting board, I believe they're, let's see, I want to say 14th. They're at 23 to 1 right now. Sandwiched between the Winnipeg Jets at 21 to 1, and the Nashville Predators at 31 to 1. So they're kind of in that like
top third.
Yeah, they're in that second tier though, beneath the likes of like Florida and Carolina, Colorado, like those types of teams where you can almost bank on the fact that they'll be there next year. So they could, I don't know, maybe good value. You get them ahead of their offseason, whatever moves they make here in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I think too, kind of just looking at that roadmap that I was kind of talking about, where it's like if you go out and get a guy like Stevenson, you get a guy like Toffoli, you're probably okay. If you get like a guy like Toffoli, especially, you're probably okay with letting DeBrusk walk. I mean, obviously you'd like to have both of those guys, but maybe that's not. But like I do think they've been pretty good on the margins. I thought Sweeney had a fairly decent offseason and into the regular season last year with like the cap crunch that they had to come out and build a team that still got into the second round, still was in
like
contention for the President's Trophy.
Going into last offseason was like they're porked.
Yeah.
They don't have any space. Like they literally can't fill out the roster. And then you looked up and you're like,
and that's
not
why
a bad team they built.
That's why I look at those top, the forwards or whatever, especially like if you want to go out and get a center, one of those top centers, you want to go out and get a winger who could score 30 goals. Like maybe you can live with that and then build on the margins down the roster as they've done in the past. It's like, and you look at the decor. The decor is actually pretty set, even if Grzelcyk walks. You look at like, you remember how many people killed the Peak move when they traded for Peak at the deadline? You're like, look at these numbers. This guy stinks. And then he got hurt in the playoffs. It's like, when's Peak coming back? It's like, that's pretty. And Shattenkirk, who's a UFA again this year, he's another guy who wasn't an all-star necessarily, but was dependable. So I think he's done a pretty good job of finding those roster fillers to kind of complement everything up top when they've had to start paying their own guys or when they have to go out and make deals either at the deadline or in the offseason. So.
Yeah. The one thing I will say about the defense, though, is like I'd like to see them like put guys in position to succeed a little more. Like I think that there were probably spots where like Hampus Lindholm was not able to really play to his strengths. Like you're kind of backed into a situation where you're looking at him to be almost a de facto like shutdown defenseman, which that's not his game.
Right.
So what the blue line looks like is sort of a, I don't know, sneaky underrated storyline.
Yeah, I mean, like Mason Lowride takes a huge step, then everything looks a lot better. So
yeah,
I don't know. I think they're, from a betting standpoint, 23-1. If they're going to be 11-1 by Easter next year.
Do you want me to throw a little Bruins awards odds at you for the purposes of this conversation?
Yeah, why not?
So the Hart Trophy awarded to the most valuable player. Let's see, what do we have here? David Pastrnak, as you can imagine, being the first Bruin to be on the list. He's at 20-1. So Connor McDavid is plus 180, heavy favorite. Nathan McKinnon 5-1, Austin Matthews 10-1, Jack Hughes 10-1, and then you get into a cluster of 20-1s. That is Nikita Kucherov, Leon Draisaitl, more on him in a minute, Cale Makar, Pastrnak, and those are all 20-1. Draisaitl, I wanted to circle back on him because I know that there's like that rumor percolating out there now that maybe the Oilers move on from him. Free agent next year. That pique your interest at all?
No.
Which is why so? If the player or the impending contract, or both? I mean,
both, but also the situation that he's in right now. You're playing with the best player in the planet.
Think just doesn't want to leave Edmonton.
Well, I just don't know how good he is once you get him away from Edmonton either. It's not something I would. I just don't see how the Bruins.
How old is he? What is he? 28?
Maybe.
Let me look that up.
The Bruins would have to make a pretty
20. Yeah, he'll be 29 in October.
Be a pretty big roster overhaul to make the money work, right? And so I'm cool with rolling with what you have at the top if it means I'm not blowing up that core, the high-paid core that the Bruins have, to take a shot on a guy who I'm not totally sure is going to be a great fit.
Yep.
If it's like...
Well, I mean, the trade acquisition cost, too, is that's a factor.
That too.
Maybe you just...
You can't make that... that's what I'm saying. But that's my point. Is
maybe just
you
wait
have
till
to
next year and try to sign him next year.
Legit superstar on your roster, and that's a pretty short list of guys who could be. Because you don't have the
draft capital, that's for sure.
You're trading one of those. You're trading an all-star plus your top 4 prospects or whatever. Now you're just okay, go score 60 goals, I guess.
Other awards of note, the Vezina. So I thought this was kind of interesting just to look at real quick. So Jeremy Swayman is actually a co-favorite for the Vezina next year with Connor Hellebuck and Igor Shesterkin. All three of them 6-1. Linus Ullmark with the Senators at 15-1. So I guess the question is would you rather take Swayman at 6-1 or Ullmark at 15-1?
Swayman.
I probably would too.
Because I know Ullmark's won at Vezina. I know he's great.
But he could stink in Ottawa.
He could stink. They could stink. You have to be really good to win that trophy in Ottawa, I think. More often than not, it's going to be a playoff team. So I don't know if they're a playoff team. I just think if the Bruins are anything close to what they were last year, if Swayman's anything close to what he was last year, he's going to be closer to that top of the ballot. Even at that lower number, I would still just take my chances with that.
I am kind of interested to see, though, if the goaltender they brought in from Ottawa, if they keep him?
Yeah.
Or is that part of is there another shoot or drop there?
So I think they probably, I don't know. I have no idea.
I mean, it's a pretty, you're between the Swayman extension and his salary, they're going to commit more to the goaltending tandem than they did this past year, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, but it would have been, I mean, it's basically $2 million. So it's.
Yeah. But I think kind of the assumption was okay, well, we're just going to pay Swayman and then we're going to get
they have to pay Swayman something.
The cheapest guy imaginable to play alongside him. But it kind of goes back to the conversation of how much stock do you put in the regular season
versus the playoffs, yeah.
I don't know. That's great answers, but it's a fascinating offseason. More so than last year, I think.
I agree, yeah.
So...
All right. The NBA draft is this week. I don't want to say.
Let's just leave that out there.
This is one that maybe
it snuck up on
we
us.
got out over our skis on. I don't know where you want to attack this from. We also have some NBA news to kind of kick around. Let's go really quick through the NBA just because I think a lot of this is going to be dated by the time our voices are heard by the masses. There was JJ Redick gets hired in LA. I think hopefully you have some numbers here that are going to point to. All signs pointed to Bronny James going to the Los Angeles Lakers, presumably on Thursday in round 2 of this now 2-day draft.
Yeah.
Can you back that up with numbers? What's the market saying right now?
So the market, which team will select Bronny James?
This could be completely
Lakers,
irrelevant by.
No, I don't think it will be though. I don't think it will be. Lakers minus 160 favorites,
which is staggering.
Second on the board, the Phoenix Suns at plus 750. So big canyon there.
Yeah,
and I got to think that probably is the Suns are one of the two teams that work them out, right? So that was
and also there's a lot of, or there was, it felt like some smoke around with LeBron to Phoenix. But I do wonder, I meant to look this up. I wonder how much the numbers, and this kind of ties in the Redick thing. Redick felt like a potentially handpicked guy after Hurley he does a podcast with LeBron. So do those numbers shed even more towards the Lakers after they hire Redick as a sign like, hey, they hired Redick. That's who LeBron wanted. So LeBron's not going anywhere. So they're obviously going to take Bronny. And we're staying in California. You start adding it all up. You're like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense that they're prohibitive favorites.
Yeah, I think with just it's hard to see LeBron going anywhere. Right there, there are so few teams.
Where does he want to go? What
the one that has always kind of stood out to me for whatever reason has been Philly.
Yeah.
Because, I think they're built to contend for a championship now. They have cap space. You come back to the Eastern Conference, easier path. But does he want to leave LA to go to Philly? I was just in Philly for WrestleMania.
Not a fan.
I'm not a Philly guy. Philly's not for me.
More of a Pittsburgh guy. You're more of a Pittsburgh guy.
I love Pittsburgh. If you put a team in Pittsburgh, now we're talking. But you know what I think is interesting about the JJ Redick thing too is they kind of came out and said this during the press conference that Anthony Davis was more involved in that process to hire him than LeBron,
which does tell you a lot about the future of LeBron. I think.
Yeah,
that he's going year to year at this point. Probably, right?
Which what is he 39? Yeah. So it tracks.
I would think I would look at Miami as a potential for LeBron if he were to get. I think he plays with the Lakers though, but if he were to leave, I think Miami
circle back to Cleveland maybe. One last run. I don't know. The last dance in Cleveland.
Yeah.
God, it could be a little bit of a pain.
Insufferable. Yeah.
Just to go back to the Bronny thing real quick. So Phoenix plus 750, like I said. After that, Dallas 9-1. Minnesota and Toronto both 15-1. The Knicks at 30-1. The Knicks fresh off a big deal in their own right. And then Cleveland also 30-1. And Utah 30-1.
The Knicks have any draft picks left?
No, I don't. I don't know how. Yeah, I don't know how that happens. But
you might have heard that these guys all went to college together.
Yeah, I did. I did catch wind of that.
Yeah, I think Bronny. I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to have a strong opinion on anything that's going to happen with him. He's going to go wherever his dad is. Celtics picked right before
65-1.
They picked right before the Lakers. What if Brad Stevens is just so in his bag that he's just like, I don't care, I'm doing it.
They could. Well, so that's
let's turn this into an Eli Manning situation.
So if you're a team and you're drafting Bronny, it's to was it Bill Simmons that he said you're holding him hostage?
Yeah,
which more or less.
It's kind of messed up.
But
to that kid, he's.
Do you even want to deal with that?
No.
What are you expecting?
No, because I don't think
he's the end result.
I don't think he's that good. So it's not worth the headache, right? To
Lakers just say, okay,
have
him.
It's you guys can have fun.
We don't want him
that bad. Have fun. That one's I don't know.
I do think it is interesting too that if he lands with the Lakers, which feels inevitable based on the odds, could he carve out some sort of meaningful role there? I mean, that's if he's gonna thrive anywhere and has NBA potential, it's probably there. Not even so much just playing with his father, but I don't know. JJ Redick might be able to do a little something with him, especially as a guy who himself made a career off of being a role player.
Yeah, I think it's which one was it? Was it LaMelo Ball? Didn't he kind of? It took him a while to kind of come into his own, right? Yeah. And maybe the hope is that Bronny has a similar career path. Right?
That must drive LeVar Ball crazy if you see
I know
LeBron and his son dominating out in L.A. and you're that's what I was trying to build.
I don't think Bronny's ever going to become LaMelo, but it does feel like it took him a while. I don't know. That's actually no. He won Rookie of the Year. So what do I know? Did he suck early on? Did I just make that up? What?
Who? LaMelo Ball?
Yeah.
Are you thinking Alonzo Ball?
No, because when was
Well, what was the LiAngelo?
Yeah, I guess he was a
LiAngelo ball.
He was a third overall pick. Maybe I am thinking, no.
Big
No,
baller brand. You ever
yeah.
have big baller brand shoes?
Didn't one of them kind of stink and then became? It's neither here nor there. I don't know. One of those guys sucked.
So you didn't have big baller brand shoes? What you're telling me?
I did not. Oh, we were. Yeah.
So do you want to talk about the Knicks Nets trade at all? And just
Not really.
Okay. Yeah, I don't either. But I do respect the fact that the Knicks they see an opportunity in the East and they're like, screw it, we're gonna push all our chips.
That's definitely how I would act if I was running an NBA team, because what's the worst that could happen? You get fired. Not your problem.
Yep. So. The Knicks. So right now, their NBA title odds obviously were affected by the trade for Mikal Bridges. 10-1 to win the NBA Finals. They are 5-1 to win the Eastern Conference. That's behind obviously the Celtics at plus 125, and the Bucks are also 5-1. And then I mentioned the Sixers. They're 7-1, and then you get down to the Heat 15-1, Cleveland 20-1.
I do not trust them. I think they struggle a little bit this year. They fire Thibodeau and they bring in Jay Wright.
There you go.
No.
Oh, but it's just icing on the cake.
Yeah. All right. We're running out of time. So it is the middle of June or end of June. We are just about at the halfway point of the Major League Baseball season, the official halfway point, not the Fakakta unofficial All-Star break. The Red Sox, as of today, they are 43-37, right around a handful of games over 500. What's surprised you? Are you surprised by this, I guess, is a better question. Are you surprised by how successful that the Red Sox have been through the first half of this season?
Yeah. And I've been surprised by...
That's a low bar then.
I mean, I've been surprised by how they've gotten there, I think. The fact that... And it's been a little bit of everything at different parts, right? It started off with how good the starting pitching was early, and now they've turned into this...
Like a 1980s team.
Yeah, they're just zigging when everybody else zags, which is kind of... I don't know, it's fun.
Yeah.
I think it's a fun team to watch. My concern, though, is how sustainable is that, particularly if you do make it to the playoffs, like we've seen in previous years
it's
where
not sustainable
it's
at
just
all.
home run derby.
And you just get it completely shoved up your caboose in the playoffs by really, really good pitching.
So from a long-term outlook, that worries me.
Sure.
The way in which they're winning games.
Yeah, I think it was Cora came out the other day and said, when you play the way that we play, which is a heavy emphasis on speed and aggressiveness and doing all those little things that don't necessarily...
It's a razor-thin margin for error.
You can steal a couple of games.
Yeah.
And they've probably stolen some games that it's kind of like the Bruins, right? It's we're going to play harder than you in the middle of the season, and we're going to steal those wins, quite literally. I did think it was interesting. Their Pythagorean theorem win-loss record is 45-35, so it's actually worse, or actually better than their overall record. So that suggests they've been a little unlucky. That being said, they are 17-26 against teams that are 500 or better, 26-11 against teams that are 500 or worse. Thing with that is there's a lot of bad teams. So you can continue to play. What is that? 26 of 37. I don't know. I'm not sure what that equates to in terms of winning percentage. But if you continue to win at that clip, you're going to be hanging around all year. They are 10-5 in one-run games, though. That's one of those things where you're the sustainability models are starting to bark a little bit. That being said, Fangraphs right now says they have a 40% chance of making the playoffs, which I do think is better than anybody would have expected at this time this year. The trade deadline is on the horizon. What do you do? Craig Breslow has played his cards very close to the vest, saying we need more time to decide, which is understandable. I don't think he completely buys in what he sees. I think he has some sustainability questions as well.
Yeah.
That being said, I would maybe push him to be a little aggressive.
Okay.
It's your first year. I'm not saying sell the farm,
yeah,
but do something that says, hey, we might be early, but if we're early, let's take advantage of it because we don't know we're going to be back.
I think they're going to you could see a scenario where they cautiously buy.
Yeah.
Like they add pieces that are not necessarily moves where you're pushing your chips into the middle, but you're acquiring a guy like a
Andrew Peak,
exactly, like a middle infielder. I think Jeff Passan pointed out Luis Rengifo, a guy like that,
which sounds
who's
underwhelming.
fine,
yeah,
But like you have him on the club control for another year, so like you could technically factor in your plans if you're competitive next year.
You're gonna get Scott Sauer back and Jeff Suppan.
I think that's what you're looking at. Yeah. I think that's like the most realistic path for them.
I think they should.
I don't think they're gonna go out and all of a sudden just be like, we're gonna bring in 4 or 5 rentals.
Yeah. If they could find a pitcher, I think that's where I would look, because I was looking at the Bayo thing's wild. Of 70 starting pitchers with at least, of 98 starting pitchers with at least 70 innings pitched, he's 89th in Fangraphs WAR. Like the injuries too, and you're looking at guys like Houck, who knows? I mean, he's been fantastic, but the workload is something that hasn't been anywhere near this in his past. So like,
Bayo's kind of a good like microcosm, right? Because like we've seen there's a thin margin for error there, like that on Tuesday night. Like things unravel a little bit and he gets sort of frustrated, and it just, you look up and they're down 5 runs. And it's like the same, like I think they're kind of still prone to that in the field. Like you see these innings sometimes where it's like there's an error and then things go south from there, and it's like the next thing you know they're looking up and they're down 4 runs.
I think it speaks to that margin. Like it's thin. And the thing with Bayo too specifically is like he outperformed his expected numbers last year, and I think he's kind of trailing behind this year. So I do think this is kind of what he is. You just kind of, and that's the thing where if you're not playing great defense or you're susceptible to one big inning, you can't lock it in when things go a little south. That's how you end up with an ERA of 5.5 or whatever. So,
but you did raise a good point too about like,
of course it is,
taking a look across the league. I mean, it's maybe do you see an opportunity where like, what if they win 8 in a row and they open up a little bit of an edge in the wild card, and you look across the league and you're like, well, there's nobody else is really that good either. It's almost like with the Knicks, like I was saying, like I kind of respect their willingness to just be like, hey, we're going to give up 100 first-round picks, but everybody else sucks, so let's just go for it and see what happens.
There's a value in trying to win, even if you're not going to win the World Series necessarily. Like there's a value in trying to push some chips in and say like, hey, let's build a winning culture here.
To that point, the Red Sox are 60-1 to win the World Series.
Yeah, I'm not betting on them to win the World Series.
Yeah, there's the same odds as the St. Louis Cardinals and the Kansas City Royals, who have been good.
The Royals are base. I love the Royals.
It's 60-1. That's a little bit surprising given how well they've played. Right behind them is the New York Mets riding the Grimace momentum. They're sitting at 80-1. Red Sox to win the AL, in case you were curious about that, which I know for an absolute fact you were. 31-1.
I'd be I might talk myself into, because you just get in. I know we just talked about the fact that they're completely porked if they do get in, but 30-1 for you just got to get hot for 2 weeks. We saw it happen at 21. So
I mean, very much would be in the mold of like the Diamondbacks last year, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that's sort of the blueprint, I guess, like where they like I got to think that the Diamondbacks went into last year and they probably looked ahead and they were like, we're going to be competitive next year or the year after, and obviously things got expedited a little bit. So I think they're very similar.
And they probably benefited from that, right?
Yeah,
it didn't hurt. All right, before we go, so this is. Oh, I forgot to drop my conspiracy theory. Speaking, this is a perfect. I think
I'm dying to hear this.
Going back to Bronny, I'm betting all of the second round props. Somebody came up to us and was like, "Well, you guys are screwed if they take him in the first round, because then you're gonna look like idiots because this thing's gonna not have any timeliness." I think it's a lock that he's a second round pick. I think there's some sort of conspiracy that the NBA is making him go in the second round to get more people to watch on Thursday as part of the second night.
Okay,
so I think he's ticketed for the second round no matter what.
His over-under draft position, by the way, at FanDuel Sportsbook, 54.5. That is juice to the over. Lakers pick at 55.
56,
right?
I think. Yeah, it's in that neighborhood.
Okay, yeah. So there you go. Basically, it's like it's the Lakers.
Yeah, exactly. I think everybody understands.
It's the Lakers in round 2. I like how we circled back on.
But it's at 4 o'clock. I think it starts at 4 o'clock on Thursday. That's, I think, because of the debates on Thursday night. Are you going to watch the presidential debate between two gentlemen named Donald Trump and Joseph Biden?
Yeah, I'll poke my head in.
Are you?
Yeah, why not?
It was a complete cluster cluck
Yeah, I want to be part of it.
4 years ago, whatever. I just seems kind of productive.
Keeps me entertained.
But this is an impromptu segment of you can bet on it. You can bet on the presidential debate. We just keep going back to this betonline.ag. Let me just run you through some stuff. Stop me if you hear anything you like. One thing you can bet on is Vladimir Putin mentions over is the over under set at 4.5 with a little bit of juice. Actually, no, I think it's just minus 120 to both. I like the over there. Speaking of
that's a lot, though.
I know, but
that's high.
All it takes is one conversation about it.
I guess you're right.
I also think of the countries outside of America, I think China was the favorite to be said first. I like Russia plus 325. I wish I could parlay that with the Putin thing, and now I'm really getting home. Candidate trending highest on Twitter /X at the end. Trump is a prohibitive minus 400 favorite. That makes sense. Like Biden would have to pass out, I think, for that to hit, but he's plus 250. First to say shut up to the other, Joe Biden, minus 150 favorite. He was, will you shut up, man, was a famous thing from that. Hunter Biden mentions the over-under set at 2 with the juice to the under, so we're a little bit of civility. And I also looked at said first regarding the Trump indictments. Witch hunt is plus 220. Felon is plus 240. I think that all comes down to who's talking first, right? I like 240. I think there's some value there. I think Biden's going to hammer home the fact that if you're voting for Donald Trump, you're voting for a convicted felon. So I think that's my quick handicap of that. Do you have any takes on this market?
A plus 100 to whether they will shake hands before or after the debate.
You can only get no, right? I think that's
yes.
Oh, is it? Oh,
yeah.
Okay, right. So it's even money.
Yeah.
I think I would bet on no, but
it's great debating you, Mike.
I look forward to relitigating.
I want to shake your hand. Hopefully that's how it erupts too.
Yeah, I look forward to that. I think that's
we'll reassess.
It's better than sports at this point. So, anything else, Ricky?
Nope. That's
we
it.
have other work that we need to attend to. So,
did we mention that already?
Thank you for joining us on the Spread Nesson's Sports Betting Picks podcast. That's Ricky. I am Mike. We'll be back again next week, probably. We'll talk to you then. Goodbye.